Hi bakers! This demo is in response to a challenge from one of you. So last week during our live meeting, Sydney challenged me to do some international desserts, and I'm gonna have to do it. I'm gonna do the international part because frankly I can't have any more desserts in my house because it's super unhealthy. But I am gonna do international food today. I'm actually gonna make sushi and to be more specific, maki, which is the rolled type of sushi. So before I get to the fun part of rolling it up, I have to get some mise en place ready, and that's gonna start with my shrimp. All right, so I have some shrimp here in a bowl of water. So these were actually IQF, individually quick frozen shrimp that I needed to thaw. So I put them in a bowl, and I had cold water in the bowl, and then I let my cold water just gently run so that I could safely thaw my shrimp. So now they're all nice and thawed. If you've ever seen sushi with shrimp in it, and you can use lots of seafoods, but I just had shrimp, so that's what I'm going to use. Usually this shrimp is straight. So when we cook shrimp by itself, it wants to curl up. The muscles start to tense up from the heat and they curl up. But it makes it really hard to make a nice even roll. So what they do in Japan, which by the way, I'm not a sushi expert, but what they do in Japan is they actually take a skewer and stick it in to straighten the shrimp up before they cook it. So that skewer is going to stay in during the cooking process, and that's going to keep the shrimp from curling up into that little C. So I'm going to do that with all of my shrimp that I got here. So again, I'm just going to straighten up that shrimp just on the bottom half underneath the shell, and I have not taken the shell off yet. The shell is going to help keep it straight. We'll peel it after they're cooked. So a lot of times sushi uses raw seafood, which I particularly love. Having said that, we are in a time where we kind of have to be even more conscious of health and food safety more than ever. So I personally don't feel comfortable using raw seafood. I'm trying to, for the most part, use things that are going to cook. That's my own personal opinion. The CDC has not recommended that we stop eating food that other people have touched, but I have made the decision personally to do that. So if I'm eating food that people have touched, I'm going to cook it first. It's also a little bit more expensive to use sushi grade meats, or seafood rather. They tend to be more expensive, but you want them to be really good quality if you're not cooking it. It's pretty important. So I'm going to do this with all of my shrimp, and then I will show you how to cook them. Okay, so my water is up to a boil, so I'm going to put my shrimp in here, put all of them in, and this is going to go pretty quickly, just going to take 2 or 3 minutes. Shrimp do not take very long to cook, and you don't want to overcook them because they very quickly become rubbery. You'll even see already how quickly they're changing color. So I'm going to check them periodically, and I'll show you what to look for. Okay, so it's been maybe 2 minutes, so I'm going to check it, and I'm going to squeeze in the fattest part, and it should feel nice and firm, which this one does. So I'm going to turn off the heat, so when you do like that, it shouldn't feel squishy, it should feel really firm. And then I'm going to quickly take them out and put them in an ice bath because I want them to stop cooking quickly, because if I don't, they'll actually just keep cooking, which I super don't want. If I was in the industry, this bath would have a lot more ice, but I don't have that much ice at home because I don't have an ice machine. So I'm gonna get these in and I'm gonna let them cool, and then I can finish preparing them for the sushi. Okay, so it doesn't take long for your shrimp to be cool enough to handle, so it's been maybe 2 or 3 minutes. So now I can go ahead and peel it. So I'm going to take my thumb and kind of go on the bottom where his little legs are, and then peel back the sections. Make sure I get all those legs off. And this back section too, and these are frozen, so some of the tail pieces have already fallen off. But it's pretty traditional to have the tail piece on in Japanese sushi, so we're going to leave them on today. I'm going to take off my skewer. And then very carefully with a sharp knife, even got my Japanese knife out, we're going to cut from the belly. So this line right here, that's the back. So we're going to cut from the belly. And you can see my shrimp stayed pretty straight. This one has a tiny little curve to it, but it's okay. So I'm going to cut very gently till I get almost all the way through. And if you saw a real sushi chef, they would do this way easier than I do. It's just one quick motion. And then I'm going to flip it up. And so you can see there's kind of some black pieces. So that is a vein that you want to remove. You can kind of peel this section back. You know what, I think for my sushi rolls, I'm actually gonna cut them all the way through today. You were doing nigiri, so nigiri is when there's like rice just with a piece of fish or shrimp on it. You would keep it whole. But since I'm doing maki rolls, I think I'm just gonna use the half piece. It's gonna be perfect for me. So that shrimp's ready. And if there's a lot of that vein inside, you can take kind of a paper towel to make sure you really wipe it off nice and clean. Your cooking time for these shrimp is going to vary based on the size of your shrimp. These are not massive shrimp. They're also not itty bitty. It's very difficult to do this with itty bitty. As you can imagine, skewering all those tiny little shrimp would be pretty time consuming. So I wouldn't go too small if you were going to do this. Again, take that off. Slice it open. Look for the pieces of the vein. If I had gotten these perfectly straight, I could have cut it without going all the way through. Or if I was a classically trained sushi chef, I could totally do this. This one has a lot. I'm gonna grab some paper towels real quick. So with a damp paper towel, just gonna wipe all that off. So Japanese sushi culture is incredibly interesting. People train for years and years before they're even allowed to do this part. A lot of parts of sushi, actually. It's a very long period. Obviously, I'm not trained. So this is just how I would do it at home, I would say. Not necessarily how a professional would do it. So I'm going to cut all the way through for this guy. And there we go. And I'm going to keep doing that with all my shrimp. Okay, so now I want to prep the cucumber, which is going to be another one of my fillings along with the shrimp. You don't have to use cucumber. There's lots of different options, but I like cucumber. It gives a little like crispness, a little crunch inside the sushi, and texture is really nice. So I want to think about, so these are my wrappers that I'm going to use later. And I want to think about how big I want these pieces to be. I don't want them to really be overlapped. I want it to kind of just be like one continuous piece throughout. So I'm going to do my hand measurements. Y'all know I like to do. So my hand, if I stretch it out really wide from here to here, is 8 inches. And that's really helpful for me. And it just so happens that all my sushi wrappers from here to here is 8 inches. So I don't need a ruler. Always got my hand on me. So I know if I stretch my hand really wide, that is 8 inches. So if I wanted one really long continuous piece, I could just use this. It's a little bit harder to work with just because it's really long. So I'm actually going to cut it in half like that. It's just going to be a little bit easier to work with. So then I'm going to cut them again in half. And these are English cucumbers, by the way. It's kind of they have a really great texture to them. They're very nice and crisp and really flavorful. So get them all into quarters. And I might not need all this cucumber. We shall see. And if I don't use it, I will put it in a salad or eat it as a snack because I like cucumbers a lot. So once they're all in quarters, I'm going to put the skin side down, and I'm going to very carefully remove, I don't know if you can see the seed section or not, but at the top of that peak there's the seed section, and I'm going to very gently remove that, because most of that is water. It's mostly water, so I don't really want that in my sushi. Okay, so I'm going to do that for all of them, and then I'll show you the next step. So I've gotten all the seeds out of the cucumbers, and now I'm going to cut them into smaller strips, and the size of strip just depends on how much crunch you like in your sushi. I'm going to do these probably in about 4 pieces, which will give me these nice sticks, so when I put it in my sushi roll, I have 2 next to each other like that. You could do them bigger, you could do them smaller, kind of depends on whatever you want to do. One thing I didn't mention about English cucumbers that's really nice is that the skin is actually pretty tender, so you don't have to peel them, which is really nice because it saves a lot of time. Sushi is kind of time consuming anyway. I do this one in 6, it's a little bit bigger. So that kind of step can save you some time at home. And also when you cut into your sushi, it'll just be another color variance, which will look really pretty. So I'm going to get all these cucumbers cut up into little sticks, and then we'll go on from there. Alright, so I wanted to make some spicy mayonnaise to go with my sushi, but I didn't have mayonnaise, so I'm going to make some mayonnaise real quick, and then I'm going to turn it into the spicy mayonnaise that you see on a lot of sushi rolls. So in this really tall container, I have a whole egg, some lemon juice, Dijon mustard, rice wine vinegar, and a pinch of salt. And I'm going to add my last ingredient. It's really important to add it at the last, is olive oil. So you want that to be on top. And we're going to create an emulsion. Usually when you make mayonnaise, you have to like slowly add it in. We're going to do it kind of backwards with this immersion blender. It's a little bit faster this way. So I'm going to put my immersion blender in, and I'm going to turn it on, and then I'm going to very slowly raise it up to create that emulsion. All right, so here we go. So you can already see it's turning really pale at the bottom. And I'm just very slowly raising it up to just slowly start to incorporate more olive oil. So just like that, in about 2 minutes or so, I've made my own mayonnaise. You can see it's nice and thick. Mine is a little bit different color than regular mayonnaise for a couple reasons. One, and I keep saying it, I'm using these farm fresh eggs from my brother's house, and they're really yellow. So that's why this kind of has a yellow tinge, and it even has a little bit of a green tinge because I used olive oil, which sometimes can have more of a green tinge than a more neutral oil. I would have preferred a more neutral tasting oil, but I didn't have one, so we're gonna go with what we got. So now I have mayonnaise, so now I can flavor it into the spicy mayonnaise to go onto my sushi. All right, so there's 2 kind of key flavorings to that mayonnaise you see on sushi, and the first one is something spicy, obviously, so I'm gonna use sriracha, which is an Asian style hot sauce. It's delicious. It's definitely got some spice to it, but it's not crazy spicy. It's somewhat spicy, but it's not crazy, but it also has a lot of garlic to it, so it's gonna be really good. So, and I'm not gonna measure any of this. I'm just gonna kind of add some and then do it to taste. And then the other ingredient I'm gonna use is some sesame oil, which has this really awesome nutty flavor. And mine is refrigerated, so it's taking a minute to come out. There it goes. And I'm just gonna, sesame oil strong, so be careful. Can get pretty overpowering quickly. So I'm just gonna combine this, taste it, add more if I need to, taste it for salt, those kinds of things. And once it's ready, it's gonna be good to go on to sushi. All right, so my mayo is all finished. I ended up adding way more sriracha, and I actually ended up adding a little bit of sugar and a little bit more salt. and then a splash of vinegar, which is why it's a little thinner, because I did add some more liquid, but this is just gonna get drizzled on the sushi, so it being a little thinner is just fine. And now it's also delicious. Delicious. Wow, more delicious. Let's go with that. It's way more delicious. So it's time for us to get the sushi rice cooking. Before we start, we are gonna rinse it off, and we're gonna look for this water to run clear before we start to cook it. So I'm just gonna run it under water, kind of shake it around, and make sure that my water is running clear before I stop. Okay, to my pot, I'm gonna add my water and the rice that I just washed. And I'm gonna put it on a high heat. And then I'm gonna bring it to a boil. And this is sushi rice, so there's lots of different types of rice. This is sushi rice, which is kind of best. It's grown to have the right properties for sushi. There's lots of different types of rice, but the cooking method's all pretty similar. So I'm gonna bring this to a boil, and I'll check back with you in a second. So our rice has just come to a boil, so it's just as it comes to a boil, we want to lower the heat down to low, and then we're gonna cover it and we're gonna let it cook. We're gonna check it in about 15 minutes. I might give it a quick stir. Looks like there's a lot of rice on one side of the pan. Give it a quick stir before I cover it. Make sure everything's all level. Perfect. So on a low heat, I'll check it in 15 minutes. So it's been 15 minutes, time to check on our rice. So we're gonna open it up, and we don't see any liquid anymore. We just see cooked rice, and we also see kind of how we see little almost pockets. That's another great indication that our rice is done. So I'm gonna let this sit for about 5 minutes with the lid on, just to make sure it's cooked all the way through. And then meanwhile, I have my seasoning mixture of rice vinegar, salt, sugar, and a little bit of vegetable oil heating in the microwave. You could put it on a sauce pot and boil it, but it's kind of a little bit more time consuming. So I just popped it in the microwave. The idea is that you get the salt and the sugar all dissolved, and we're gonna add that together in just a second. So the rice has cooled down a little bit, so I'm gonna pop it into some kind of big flat tray. So I'm gonna cool it down quickly. Traditionally, they would use basically this big flat wooden bowl, but I don't have one. So I'm gonna use this casserole pan because that's what I have. So I'm just gonna get it in here. The idea is whatever vessel you use, you kind of want a lot of space to kind of move it around so you can cool it quickly so it doesn't overcook on you. So I'm gonna get all of this out. And this is actually a traditional rice spoon from Japan when I went to Japan a couple years ago. You don't have to use this. Obviously, not everybody has one of these at home. You could just use something with a soft edge. If you use something that has a really sharp edge, like a metal spatula, it's going to start to cut into your rice and make it really, really sticky and gluey, and we don't want that. Also, at this step, I'm going to add my seasoning mixture. So this is my vinegar, oil, salt, and sugar. And it's going to seem wet at first, but I'm gonna keep mixing it together. Since it's still hot, a lot of that steam is gonna kind of evaporate a little bit of that liquid. So I'm just gonna very gently continue to stir this rice until it's pretty much completely cooled down. All right, now we have everything together. I'm gonna show you how to assemble. So I'm gonna start with one of my seaweed sheets. It's called nori in Japanese. And you wanna open this at the last second because they're really susceptible to moisture and you don't want them to get super, super soggy. And then you're gonna look at it. And hopefully you can see there's a shiny side and then there's kind of a rough side. So this is the shiny side, and you want the shiny side to be down on your mat. And you don't have to use a mat. You could just roll this just like we did with our garlic cinnamon rolls. It works the same, but the mat helps to make it a little bit more even. So then next goes the rice. Before I get the rice, I'm going to, with clean hands, get a little bit of water, just a little bit of water on my hands. I don't want a lot of water. And what that's just going to do is make sure that the rice doesn't stick to my hands, because it is a little sticky. And then I'm going to get that rice, and I'm going to start to very gently press it into my seaweed, kind of spread it out. So I want to keep maybe like an inch or so at the top without any rice, and then I want to spread rice on the whole rest of it. It'll take me just a second. You want to try to make sure it's even. And if you realize you missed a spot, you can just come and pick up some more. That's okay. And you want to try to get it at the edges too. Try to make it even all the way. The more even this is right now, the prettier your roll is going to be when you go to cut into it. So it's okay to take a little time. If you watch someone who does sushi for a living, a trained Japanese sushi chef, they go very, very fast at this. And obviously I'm not a trained Japanese sushi chef. Although I did take a class when I was in Japan, it's still not the same. All right, so then I'm gonna add my shrimp next. So I'm gonna just lay it in the center, and I wanna kind of try to have one even piece. Now, this is when cooking our shrimp straight is really important. So if we had it curled, it'd been really hard to have the same amount of shrimp in every bite and to make it nice and even. So this is why we spent the time to make sure it's nice and straight. So I want this about the same amount, and our shrimp are tapered, right? They're kind of fat towards their head, and they taper skinnier towards the tail. So I'm gonna kind of overlap the tail, so I try and maintain the same thickness throughout, and then I'll butt a head up to that head, and then I'll grab another one and just make sure it goes all the way across, just like that. And then next I'm gonna add my English cucumber. And remember, I have already measured, so they actually fit perfectly. Then the last piece is I'm gonna add some avocado. So I already cut up this one for another sushi roll. So I'm just gonna take a butter knife and just kind of scoop it out and place it on. I can place it here. I'm gonna, actually I'll place it here. Why not? Looks like I'll probably need just 2 slices. Maybe just a little piece right there. So it's all avocado all the way through, because I very much love avocado. So I'm gonna maybe squish them down a little bit. So now I'm gonna start to roll. So the bamboo mat is helpful, but again, you don't have to. You just wanna make sure your hands are really dry so you don't stick to the seaweed wrapper any. Need a little bit more right there. So I'm going to lift this up using the wrapper, and I'm gonna let this excess kind of fold back. And I'm gonna go up and over my toppings until I get back down to the rice. And then I'm gonna really press in with the tips of my fingers on the bottom. I don't wanna press crazy hard because I don't wanna compact it, but I just wanna make sure it's nice and set. And then I'll take it over and I'll fold it over again, and then I'll do the same thing. Just the tips of my fingers, just as the bottom, just to kind of get it closed a little bit. And then I'm gonna take just a little water on this last little bit, just to make sure that it sticks and doesn't want to unravel on me. And I'm gonna go all the way. Again, just with a gentle hand, gentle but firm. Squeeze it together so when I unroll, should be this nice even log, which is a little harder to get it as even when you do it without the mat, but not impossible either. So I can get rid of this mat now, and then I can cut up my sushi. Okay, so now it's time to cut our roll, even though I could just sit here and eat this as a log. It's not quite as pretty. So we're gonna cut this up. So I have a clean towel that's just got a little bit of water on it, just to keep my knife a little damp. It's gonna help make sure that the sushi rice doesn't stick. So I'm gonna start by cutting it in half. As few motions as possible. And I should have a little spiral in there. Yeah, nice. And then clean off my knife in between each cut. And then I'm gonna do each of these in half again. Half again. And you kind of want to have pretty gentle pressure when you do this. If you watched someone in a restaurant doing this, they'd do the same thing. They'd clean their knife off every time. It's going to make for much nicer and cleaner cuts. All right, so now it is time to plate. So I already have a plate ready here with some soy sauce and some pickled ginger, and I'm gonna display these. So the important thing is end pieces are typically not very pretty. So we wanna make sure we're flipping them up so we can see the inside. So we're gonna go just like that. And it's kind of traditional to fan it, and these are probably still even kind of fat pieces, which is okay with me because I like lots of sushi. And if you're weirded out by sushi because of raw fish, good news about this one is that there's no raw fish in it. We cooked that shrimp, so it is all cooked, no worries. Oops, get my bottom ugly piece on there first. Now I have pickled ginger here. That's kind of what we traditionally eat in the United States with our sushi. And a lot of Americans think that you should eat it on top of your sushi. And while I agree that it is delicious that way, it's not traditional. It's actually supposed to be eaten in between your sushi, kind of as a palate cleanser to reset your taste buds so that every time you eat a piece of sushi, it tastes basically brand new, like you've eaten it for the first time. We eat pickled ginger a lot here with ours, but they have tons of different pickles that they use in Japan. Garlic, pickled onions, pickled daikon radishes. But really here, mostly what you can get is pickled ginger, which I still very much love. Oh my goodness, you guys, I almost forgot my mayonnaise. And that's like one of my favorite parts about American style sushi is the spicy mayonnaise on top. It's so good, especially with you got like creamy avocado and cooling cucumbers in this one. It's gonna be really good. Now typically they kind of drizzle over top. They'll put it in a squeeze bottle and drizzle it over top. But I don't have a squeeze bottle here, but because I'm a pastry chef, I have a piping bag. So I'm gonna use my piping bag to do the same thing. You could just put it in a spoon and kind of drizzle it if you don't have either of those. But I'm gonna be a little bit extra. I don't need a piping tip or anything, so I just cut off the tip, cut off a little bit more. And a little bit more. There we go. And then I'm just gonna drizzle it right on top. And I'm gonna go kind of diagonal, like the opposite diagonal, since my sushi are going that way. I think that's gonna be pretty. And then it kind of helps make that color pop too, which is really nice. And that's it.